excited because we've been so busy. Sometimes we're not all here together. So I have Barry Lynn Wood, I have Allison Green, and I have Laura Fisher. So I noticed that you have all turned off your mics. I appreciate that greatly. If you could please also turn off your cameras because this will be recorded and we want to have the best quality recording and reception for all of us to have. So if you have your camera on, take a moment to please turn it off. Thank you so much. And I'm even going to go off camera once I start bringing the slideshow up. So without further ado, let me bring my presentation up and hopefully it will be the correct one. It is. If you do not see my presentation, please unmute and let me know. I should be off camera too. Hold on. There we go. So can everybody see this? This is a one time that you can say yay or nay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Well, today's topic is silky leash. And I'm hoping that this will give you some insight on this technique that's used quite frequently. It sounds really fancy, like you should be getting ready for a sit-down dinner or something, right? Silk and leash, and it could sound something else, but we won't go there. But anyway, so we're going to talk about this, and my hope is that this will give you a stronger connection to your puppy through the leash, all right? Let's talk a little bit about what is Silky Leash. It is in your puppy raiser manual. It's explained very well there, but we're going to go into a little bit more detail. And I apologize, I didn't put the page numbers. I went to make my tea and I forgot. But please look through your puppy raiser manual. It is listed in there. And you can read that brief description, but I'm going to give you a little bit more. So Silky Leash was termed by a dog trainer named Grisha Stewart. Wonderful, amazing information she provides out there on the internets, interwebs, and et cetera, But she termed this technique Silky Leash because she said, I want everyone to picture how silk would feel going through your hands. And if it was a thin, thin string. I think someone has their microphone on. If you could please mute, that would be amazing. So Silky Leash basically teaches our puppy to yield to collar pressure. And it's a behavior that needs to be reinforced. And we'll talk about why it needs to be reinforced and why we need to practice our puppy yielding into pressure on the slides further ahead. But gentle pressure becomes the cue or signal to move in the direction of the leash pull. It is a technique, and collar cues become the learned behaviors. So Silky Leash is a technique, and I'm going to repeat this again because it gets a little different as you're going through and you get confused sometimes. Silky Leash is a technique that you're practicing with your puppy. Collar cues are learned behaviors, okay? It's a learned behavior. And remember, we think of cues as being verbal, right? Sit, down, come, stand. Well, here the cue is that pressure, and we'll talk about that too. I want to make sure, let's see. All right. Yeah, so I want to make sure that I mention one more thing. I thought my slideshow slipped, but it didn't. And I want you to understand that leaning into that pressure, it's not natural. It doesn't come naturally to dogs or to other animals for that matter. And here's why. What does come naturally is something that we call the opposition reflex. The opposition reflex is a natural reaction response, and it comes very naturally, not only to dogs, but to horses, to people. And it's a reaction when the animal is presented with a pulling pressure, it goes in the opposite of that pressure. So if you're pulling, the animal's going to go in the opposite way, okay? It's apparent in many species, like I said, in dogs, in horses, in humans. You know, I always wonder, I want to say in cats, but I'm pretty sure in cats as well, but I'm not sure. I'd have to look that up before saying. And thanks, Barry Lynn, for putting everybody's email up. So here and it's really, to me, sometimes people examples paint a really good picture. So I want to give you an example. When I was zip lining with my son, we went to Nevada and we were climbing up these beautiful canyons, and it was just really pretty, and I was looking at the formation of the rock. All of a sudden my son pulls my shirt from behind me, and I jerked intentionally forward. And Jay says, Mom, you're going to fall down. And I said, Oh, okay. But my initial reaction was so instinctive. I just pulled away from that pull. And this is something that our dogs do when they're on leash. And eventually, from an instinctive behavior, it becomes a habit. Your dog gets into this habit of pulling. So before we move on to the next slide, I know opposition reflex, you're like, well, if it naturally occurs, what do we do? And we'll talk about that. But what about a push? So when we pull VJ away from the canyon that's dipping down, she pulls forward. That's when we pull. What about if we push? It's really cool. I read this study, and it said that when we push these species, they tend to push forward too. They tend to go with that push instead of pulling back. So a push, go with. A pull, they go against. And these studies that I read, they said that this is instinctive for the survival, right? If you think about predators and they're coming after their prey, they're trying to yank them, so the instinct is to pull away. So this has been going on for a while, guys. This pulling away, this opposition reflex. I was like, oh my goodness. So, okay, we've got it. We want to do Silky Leash, but before we get into Silky Leash, here is why we want to work on this technique. It's real simple. Safety and health. They're connected at the leash. And it's connected on both ends, both for your puppy and both for you. We want to work on this technique because of safety and health. So let's start with your puppy. If your puppy is constantly pulling, remember I said at first it's just instinctive, but if your puppy gets a habit of pulling, it can cause severe injuries to the neck and other areas. And here's some example, some choking. So have any of you experienced, where I'm sure there's quite a few of you, where the puppy is pulling so much that they start having this rough sound, this gagging. Sometimes they throw up, right? Cuts. So if a puppy's pulling so much and that collar or martingale cuts into their neck, sometimes they jerk forward and they might get a cut on something in the environment. Lacerations, trachea. Trachea is to the extreme. Some puppies and dogs have a natural soft trachea. And even if they don't, this constant pulling can really hurt their tracheas. Bone fractures. And again, I want you to think about not only in the neck area, but also if your puppy's pulling and the person and you're holding it and inadvertently you just let go and your puppy slams or slips. We were talking about the ice, right? And fractures because they land wrong on their leg or body or whatever. So you see where I'm going with all of these things. What about the human? So, okay, those are all the stuff that can happen to our puppies, right? For us, injuries can range from really mild to severe. And you'll notice these, it's been noted too. Again, I keep citing studies, and I didn't want to bog everyone down by listing the reading material I've done, but it has been shown that dog walkers and people that have dogs that they walk on a regular basis, they do get shoulder injuries, lower back injuries, knee bruising, cuts, scrapes, right? And what happens with the shoulder, lower back, and knee is at first it's more of a nagging. Sometimes you don't even realize, and then eventually it becomes more severe. So I put this spiral right here intentionally because it's very easy that this constant pulling, this pressure becomes habitual, both for the dog and for us. And we just spiral down that, and it's a big concern for our safety. All right, well, let's talk about the silky leash. All right, I love silky leash. And I believe that you need to give it a chance. And I want to say that it's a skill, it's a behavior. You're going to need to work this throughout the time that you have your puppy. It at first, it's a little bit discombobulated. It's a little awkward for both you because you're working on something new. But let's go through a couple of things. It looks like, okay, VJ, this is just the list, but I promise you, it's not complicated. It's just kind of like getting your mechanics and getting the sequence correct. Okay, so mechanics and sequence. So you're gonna need supplies. You're gonna need your puppy's collar on. I love the flat buckle collar, guys. If you do it in a martingale, I've been asked that, are you doing it wrong? It's not about wrong. It's just about that you're applying more pressure that you already want to minimize. So use your flat buckle collar for this exercise. Obviously, you will need your leash and you will need a chair to start out with. We're going to start with this exercise in a chair, especially if you have a small puppy. Um, so make sure your area that you work in is small and quiet. The less distractions available, the better. Keep your sessions less than 2 minutes. It's a lot of thinking. Remember, you're going to be training and teaching your puppy something that's going against their natural instinct, right? My natural instincts on that cliff, even though there was a danger, was still to pull away from my son trying to stop me. So keep your sessions short. You will be sitting in the chair, again, especially for puppies. That way you're closer to their level, right? You will be keeping this leash attached to the puppy's collar and it will stay parallel to the floor. So think about what parallel means. That means it's just straight above the floor, not going straight up into the air, but it's almost like there's an invisible table and you laid that leash on that invisible table and it's parallel to the floor, about 4 or 5 inches or wherever the height is. You are going to be applying a gentle, steady pull or pressure in one direction. So I'm going to give you time for questions after I go through these. So I know it's a lot if you haven't done this before. And by applying a gentle, steady pull or pressure in one direction, it's a big mouthful, I know. Your leash, when I say gentle, it should be a minimal. And I usually use 1 or 2 fingers. I'm holding the leash in one hand, but 1 finger or 2 is applying the pressure. And if you can't understand that, then think about applying pressure by moving your leash hand where you're holding your hand at in millimeters, the most bitty fraction that you can. So it's just a little twitch of your hand. So you're going to apply that gentle pressure. The instant the puppy leans into, you're going to mark and treat. So you're going to mark yes and treat that puppy. We're going to pause for a second. Does anybody have any questions? I see that David said there's a lot of static noise and Barry Lynn answered. So David, sometimes you do have to log out and log back in. I'm so sorry. I wish sometimes I could control everybody's clearancy so they can see and hear me clearly, but unfortunately I can't. But this will be recorded, David. But does anybody have questions on these 7 steps? Because I'm going to go forward. It's going to get easier, but does anybody have anything that confuses them before I go forward? Yes, Martin. Is this Martin? Yeah, there is a video demo on this, Martin. So good question. It's coming up. Is it Laurel? Laurel said, is puppy being encouraged to move from side to side towards you? Definitely not, Laurel. What you're doing, well, you know what? Let me back up and say that you are encouraging the puppy to move towards the pull or the pressure. So it might be towards you, okay? And then and Martin said, how do you hold the leash parallel? Martin, you're going to see me doing it in the videos. And you're also, by the time you get to the 3rd video, you're going to be able to point out where VJ did not hold it parallel. I love to share my mistakes for 2 reasons. One, seeing what you shouldn't do is really needed. And then 2, you can see that VJ makes mistakes too, okay? So someone is unmuted. Is it because you had a question or because you forgot to mute? I'm assuming it's because you forgot to mute. So moving on to the next slide. Thank you guys for your great questions. Pressure. Remember, the title of this presentation was Silk, Leash, and the pressure in between. So pressure is something that when it's applied constantly, we tend to forget it's there. And this is for we, meaning us humans, and the puppy as well, okay? So pressure can be felt at different points of contact. It travels through the length of the leash, and it's felt at both ends of the leash. So I've got 3 yellow arrows here. And our leash hand, so the reason that bottom arrow is so low is because I'm sitting low to get a cute picture of this puppy. So it is felt in our hand, definitely. So at this point in time, do you think I'm feeling a lot of pressure in my hand? What do you guys think when you look at this picture?
No.
No, right? Yeah, no, very good. Now, what about the puppy? Do you guys think the puppy's feeling any pressure on that leash? Nah, right? But here's the thing, that middle arrow, there's no pressure there as well. But if I did pull, or if the puppy did pull, there would be pressure equally or unequally distributed depending on where the pull is at that time. So if I was pulling my puppy towards me, and then I put my hand at that middle arrow, I would still feel a pressure, okay? It might be my pressure because I'm pulling, or it might be the puppy and my pressure because we're both pulling, but it's felt at both ends of the leash, okay? All right, so what about the benefits of Silky Leash? I want to do this before I show you the videos and we open up for questions. And I think, I see a question from Weber, and I will get back to you, and Weber, I will. All right, so the benefits of it. I love this picture because both puppy and dog both person and puppy look very relaxed. Okay, so the benefits is because there's many of them. The benefits are that you have a dog that yields into pressure. And when you have a yield into pressure, there's less injuries. They're on both ends, right? It also, Silky Leash can help you position your puppy. So imagine if you have a puppy, because we're so used to that pressure and pulling, but imagine this, that you just give a gentle pressure with that leash to your left heel position and your puppy moves towards it without you pulling your puppy towards it. Here's another thing that's a benefit. Learned responsiveness on the leash, right? There's so many times where I have to catch myself I'm sure we all do that. I'm like, wait a second, BJ, what are you doing? Communicate with your puppy. Stop. And then my puppy's like, oh yeah, you're back there too? Oh yeah. And we become responsive to each other. We start communicating with each other. This also prepares the puppy for loose leash success. Oh my goodness. So one of the exercises that we have for loose leash is 1, 2, 3 and reward, right? Or we also tell you to every time the puppy pulls, stop. And when the puppy releases the tension, treat. But imagine if you work on Silky Leash in your chair, in your quiet room, and your puppy gets it that yes, every time I lean into that pull, I get a mark and I get a treat. You go to loose leash and you have this feeling that the puppy has that's rewarding because one, they're not being jerked, and two, they have a reinforcement history of being rewarded for less pressure on that collar. The puppy becomes attentive to you. The puppy checks into you. It does happen. I promise. It happens. It happens. I remember as a first time puppy raiser, and I had read my puppy raiser manual. I was so adamant. I'm going to read this whole thing. When I got to Silky Leash, I was like, oh, yeah, cool. I don't get it. So, and then I asked, and in puppy development, they were so wonderful and they explained it to me. I still didn't get it. And then I thought, you know what? My puppy's doing fine. The other exercises work. I'm okay. Let me tell you, I was fine. I was okay. My puppy was fine as well. We did fine. We did great. But then I got my second puppy and I said, this puppy is a little bit more relaxed, but I want to go back to that Silky Leash. And I don't know, it just came up to my mind. I'm very grateful it did. And I worked on it. And it's like I have colorful rainbows and chocolates and pizza and everything magnificent now. It feels really good. There's a different feeling, there's a different connectivity with your dog when you have them looking to you, when that pressure is not so massive that you're in pain and your puppy's trying to keep pulling. And last but not least, it builds a good trusting relationship. All right. All right, let's get to the demo. So I have big dogs. So when I tried to demonstrate this last time, I tried to do it because I have one on Silky Leash that's very old. It's very brief. And I tried to demonstrate it on my large future career change future leader dog, Azir. And it was just really difficult to see. And I had a volunteer who was wonderful and demonstrated it. But I'm hoping these videos, and I want to say a shout out to my fellow coordinator, Allison Green, for taking them. You are absolutely correct to do them short clips because I picked the ones that I thought would illustrate what I wanted you guys to see. So what the demonstrations are the beginnings of Silky Leash. They're not perfect. And that's what I feel we all need to look at first because we've seen the dogs that walk in perfect heel position. We've seen the dogs that don't pull. But when you see how this starts out, it might give you confidence to try yourself because it's not always pretty. So the puppy that I worked with was in Puppyland in a suite. And remember I said we have to get minimal distraction? Well, in Puppyland, his fellow puppy village mates were running around and they were barking and whining because we had taken him. But we took him to a corner to the suite that was to the village that was connected. So our villages are split up. We took him to a gated area. It was just him and I and Allison. So we just minimized those distractions. We put our chair in the corner. And another thing I want to point out is this little guy, he hasn't really learned the marker word yet. Because remember, he's still in puppy care. And in puppy care, we not start out because our host families do this as well. We reward good behaviors. but we haven't really used the marker words with them in puppy care unless our dogs and puppies stay for a longer period. But this little guy hasn't been exposed to the marker word. So we've done that, and you'll see an improvement in a few minutes. At least I hope you see it. If not, we'll play them again. So there's 3 videos. The first 2 videos are in the chair. The last video is standing up. I will replay these videos, and I'm keeping my fingers, eyes, legs, arms all crossed that it all works. If it doesn't, this is being recorded, and if you have questions, you're more than welcome, and I hope you do, type them in, okay? So the first video is the beginnings. A couple of things. You're going to notice that the puppy's trying to figure it out. You're also going to notice that VJ's trying to figure it out, okay? Because I've never worked with this puppy. So let me make sure the sound is on. I don't think you really need to hear the sound, and I might end up muting it, but let's try. Oops, wrong video. This is the one. Okay. Okay. Did you guys see that video play? It's very brief.
Yes.
All right, thank you, whoever
Yes.
that was. I appreciate it. So you hear me saying, let's try again, buddy, and you hear the yes. So I want to point out a couple of things, and I'm going to replay it again so you can look. But my leash was a little too long for the area that I was in. I have my chair backed against the wall, so my leash is a little too long. The other thing I want you to notice is the puppy's trying to figure it out. Like, okay, what is she exactly trying to do here? And I did mark, and I want you to notice when I mark, so maybe I will leave the volume on here. But where do I place the treat? I'm trying to figure out where do I place the treat, and the puppy's following my hand. So watch again, especially watch the long leash. So I say yes, but this little guy, he's still figuring out the yes, right? And my leash is long and I'm trying to get it around. So this is the beginnings of loose leash. And you might have seen where the pressure was applied and you might not have. But in this next video, you will definitely see where the pressure is applied because I've done it a couple times. And I think someone's got their volume on, so if you could please turn your volume off, that would be lovely. Or if my coordinators can mute whoever has that on, that would be appreciated. All right, so here we go on the second video.
VJ, you're muted.
Am I muted now?
No, now we can hear you.
Okay, so did everyone see that last video?
No, it's not. It's really jerky on my end. It's hard to see.
Okay. All right.
Is it possible for you to tell us exactly what we should be looking at as the video goes? Can you narrate the video?
Yeah, sure I can. I can do that. Let's try playing it again, okay, guys? You ready? Here it comes. Whoops, wrong video. Okay, here it comes. So here, I applied the pressure back and treat, and again, and treat. And you'll notice for both ends, it's a little bit of the puppy's neck moving forward or the puppy's head moving forward. Was that video seen that time? I only saw the first and second ones. Okay, and that was Laurel. And Laurel, I'm going to play it one last time since the first time I was muted. And this time it's going to be with the sound, okay?
Are you pulling your hand towards the wall or are you pulling the pressure towards your legs?
So I heard a question. Am I pulling the leash towards the wall or towards my legs? So for the first few, you see where watch my arm, and it is a steady pull towards the wall, okay? And for the last one, you're absolutely correct. It is towards my leg, all right? Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. So I think someone else said they didn't see the third. This video is a lot more important for you guys to watch that collar and how that leash is being pulled than the last and the first, because I feel like this one illustrates it. So we're going to do it one more time, and then we're going to go on to the third video. All right, any questions? That's the challenges of not having in-person training. Sometimes technology and sometimes the videos, we can't depict every single angle that we'd like you to see, but I hope you saw at least the beginnings. So David says, are you just trying to give a pressure in order to elicit the relaxation to the pressure response? So David, if you can unmute, I'm going to answer the question. And then if you have any other questions, you can ask. So you're asking if I'm giving the pressure to give a relaxation. And the answer is not to exactly give a relaxation. It's more for the puppy to lean into that area where I'm applying the pressure. Okay? Because this technique is eventually going to lean into what we call the collar cues, right? First, our puppy has to lean into them, and we keep marking and rewarding that you're leaning into the pressure. Yes, here you go, the treat. You're leaning into the pressure. Yes, here you go, the treat. And eventually, that pressure is the cue. Remember we talked about verbal cues and how we're so used to giving sit, down, stand as verbal cues? Here we're giving pressure as a cue. That's the cue eventually to your puppy that this is where I have to lean in and follow instead of pulling away from it. Does that answer your question, David? If you're listening, and if you can't unmute, you can type it in as well.
So I guess I'm a little confused.
That's okay.
Are you actually treating when the puppy is pulling away or when he relaxes? Because I know when we're trying to do loose leash training, we mark and reward when the puppy releases pressure.
Okay, so what you were saying is that, yes, so releases pressure, absolutely correct. Let me rephrase it. So if I'm applying the pressure, because I think Suzanne she said, and I think she worded this exactly, and you might mean something different, but I think this is what you mean. She says you don't want the puppy to yield to pressure. Is that what you're asking, David?
I thought my understanding is you want the puppy to realize that you're applying the pressure and then kind of not give in to the pressure, but to release, to kind of
Yeah.
slacken on the leash, not pull tighter on the leash.
Exactly. You're absolutely correct. So if I apply the pressure and the puppy's leaning into it, the pressure is released, right? Automatically. And I'm marking the second the puppy leans into it, right? So I have a steady pull, and it's a steady pull, but the puppy's giving into that pressure, and then that releases that pressure because I'm not jerking, I'm just giving a steady pull to it. So you are correct.
So when you say lean into the pressure, you mean he's not pulling, but I think the terminology is kind of throwing me off because you're saying
That's okay.
lean into the pressure.
That's okay.
Pressure force is one.
All right. So when if these terms are throwing you off, but you understand what I'm saying, then I'm going to stick to your terms, okay? Because I think we're both saying the same thing. And then I think, and in your question, David, you said, are you trying to give a pressure in order to release a relaxation to the pressure? So you said the same thing, and you're absolutely correct. Yes. So what you're teaching your puppy to do is when they feel that pressure on the collar, they lean into it and it relaxes that pressure. Okay. So they're being rewarded for leaning into it, which relaxes it. So, and then Suzanne said, you don't want the puppy to yield to the pressure. I do want the puppy to yield to the pressure. And I feel like there's a lot of, that's why this session was really important to me, because the confusion comes not only with the techniques, but also in the terminology and what we're saying. So when I started talking about it, I mentioned about color cues too, and I've kept color cues on the shelf intentionally because sometimes they are confused with Silky Leash. So we're going to stick to Silky Leash now, and we're going to wrap up on color cues. But Suzanne, you're absolutely right. You do lean into the pressure. So don't you mean when the puppy stops leaning into the pressure, you release? It automatically does. So the pressure, Suzanne, should be so minimal, that tension should be so minimal that when the puppy leans into it and you're marking for that lean into, that should have relaxed. It shouldn't be that strong of a pressure that the puppy has to do anything more than lean into it. Does that make sense? Am I constantly giving the pressure? Maybe this will answer the other part of it. I'm not constantly giving this puppy pressure. I apply the pressure, the puppy leans in, I mark yes, I reward, but the minute I mark yes, that pressure, or the minute the puppy leans in, I release the pressure and mark yes. So there's not a constant pressure. What else did Suzanne and Laurel say? So yes, Suzanne, the answer to your question. Don't you mean when the puppy leans into the pressure, you release? Yeah, so there's not a constant, and thank you for pointing that out. There's not a constant application of pressure to your puppy's collar. And Laurel says, so we're offering pressure so the puppy corrects towards the pressure. Pretty much, yeah. So Laurel, you said it in different words too. And David, I did not mean to stop with your question because I think all of these questions are interconnected. And that's why I'm really happy that you guys are coming forth and clarifying it. So David, Suzanne, and Laurel, we're all going in a circle saying similar things. But here's the thing. I want you to be very clear where the pressure is applied, at what level, at what angle, right? When it's released, when you're marking, okay? By lean into, do you mean go with the pressure versus against it? Yes, Suzanne, I do. So the more clarification you need for this, please ask. Because remember, terminologies and words, if we can't clarify it and unify it, it's going to continue to be confusing. So yes, Suzanne, definitely. Lean into, do you mean go with? You can say go with as well. And then Lynn says better to say loosen rather than lean into. So Lynn, when you say loosen, when I say lean into, I am waiting for that puppy to lean into that pressure that I applied. The minute he leans into it, I mark yes, and simultaneously that pressure is released, and then I treat. So it's not the same thing. I'm asking the puppy's behavior that I am looking for. And remember I was confused for quite a while with my first puppy. So it's okay. The behavior that I'm looking for from this puppy is they're going into that pressure. They're leaning into that pressure. They're going towards that pressure. And they're going to get marked for that. Yes. You gave into that pressure. You leaned into it. You went to it. Yes. The pressure release.
Maybe think about someone who's pulling your arm. And when they grab your arm, you either go with them or you go away from them. So you either lean into them or lean away from them.
So again, and you're gonna, and I appreciate because I have Barry Lynn that's typing in here too. And I want all of you to listen to whether it's Laura, to myself, or read what Barry Lynn's saying, because this is a concept that if you get it and you understand it, it's extremely simple, but it's explained in so many different ways that it can be confusing. So if I can funnel this down for you to remember that when you start practicing with your puppy, regardless of the age, because let's say you get an older puppy and you practice with him, you need a quiet place. You need a flat buckle collar. You need a chair. You need a small area. And then you need treats. Don't make the session longer. When you practice, you are going to be applying that pressure steadily, gently in one direction. So in the middle video, I applied it back towards the wall, as someone mentioned, and again, back towards the wall, but in a little bit of a different direction, then towards my leg. So those are different directions. But every time that leash was parallel to the floor, it wasn't straight up, it wasn't straight down. At least for the general part, it wasn't. All right, so, and David, thank you. Thank you for being patient while we work through that, and thanks, Barry Lynn. All right, now, this is the part where you're gonna see a hot mess, again, at my end towards the end. And you're going to see that the dynamics change. This is a little puppy. So when I stand up, my 5'7" with Dance Goes 5'9" is going to be a little bit off. It's going to be harder to keep that parallel to the ground as it did when I was in the chair. So I want you to look for that moment when VJ forgets herself. Where's her leash? Okay, so let's see. And you're going to notice, there it is, right? So in this video, remember, I stood up and I've been doing this for a while now, okay? And still, I forgot that, hey, where is my leash in relation to the floor and the puppy's neck? So watch it one more time. And this is the first video we took when I stood up. I picked this because I wanted you to see my mistakes. So let's watch it again. And this poor little puppy's getting it, right? This little guy's getting it. he's getting it that, okay, she's gonna pull and I'm gonna lean into it. But that last one and where my leash ended, it's not good, okay? I am happy to say it got better, but any questions on this leash? I think this is a great example of how your leash should not be when you're working on Silky Leash. Any questions before we go to the next slide? Any videos that you would like repeated because one, you didn't get to see them, or two, you didn't understand. Mary says, should you start the puppy facing you or away or at your side? Mary, there's a lot of discussion about where your puppy should be and how your puppy should be relevant to where you're at. When I first start this with baby puppies, I really don't care. And let me tell you why. Because my goal is that my puppy leans in, goes towards, however you want to say it, to that pressure. I want that puppy to get that piece. And then I tend to focus on that too and not worry about the positioning of my puppy. Does positioning play an important role later on? Definitely. When you start standing up or even when you're in a chair, you want to get that puppy in the correct position, right? But to start out with, especially with baby puppies, and you saw in the first few videos that he's fast. He knows that this lady is going to say yes, and somewhere in one of her hands is going to come kibble. So yeah, it's very important that, to me, that I focus on one thing too. So I focus on the puppy giving into that pressure, leaning in, coming towards, whatever you want to say about it, and marking that. So that was a great question, Mary. Any other questions or clarifications? I'm so happy that you guys are discussing and pointing things out. Mary B said, should the leash be in a soft J shape while practicing Silky Leash? That's a good question too, Mary B. In my first video, I had a long leash. Long because it was long for that area I was in. So to start out with, I would have the leash length appropriate to your environment and your puppy's size. And I would not worry about it being a J and a loose at that right there, because I'm going to apply the pressure. I am going to give some slack in my leash in between my application of pressure. So that's where you might have a J coming in. So you're absolutely correct. That was a great question too. So I'm going to move forward, but if you think of something else or if we need to go back, we will. Oh my goodness gracious. So guys, even despite all of that, here's some things that I'm going to repeat that I'd love for you guys to please remember. Remember, this is a new behavior. This leaning into the pressure, it goes against the puppy's natural reflexes. It goes against the puppy's natural instinct. It's a new behavior of giving in, leaning in to that leash pressure. Okay, it's a new behavior. Break it into smaller steps. Maybe the first time, if your puppy does not know the marker word yes, before you start this, not maybe, definitely, please work on learning the marker word for your puppy, loading it up. Then break this into smaller steps. Maybe only do it for 30 seconds or a minute. Apply pressure once or twice or 3 times and be done. First few times, it might just be that you don't apply pressure, because if it's a new puppy, you might just have to reward the puppy for having the leash even on them. So that's what I mean by breaking into smaller steps that are relevant to your puppy. You're a learner. Your puppy's a learner, right? Frequent rewards. Oh my goodness. You've got to increase that kibble delivery. Make it faster, because puppies are fast. So for my videos, I did not have my treat pouch on, because sitting down, I'd have to reach behind. I had my kibble in my pouch on the ledge next to me, okay? Keep the leash tension slight and steady. So there's no jerking. There's no pressure that's maximum. You want to start with the smallest amount of pressure and work up from there, okay? Change the direction of the pull that you're doing. So it might be to your left, it might be a little bit more to your right, but change it gently. Don't change it drastically, okay? It might be behind you. Pressure is the cue. That is the cue that your puppy has to lean in, go into it, okay? Mary Haddis, I'm going to get to questions now. And I'd like to leave this screen up for a second and say thank you so very, very much, guys, for joining us. The first person on the left is our wonderful supervisor, Bev Ferguson, and this is Zach. This is Barry Lynn. There I am. There's my awesome Laura Fisher and my awesome Allison Green. And I see questions hopping in, so I'm going to get out of this presentation and answer them for you. And I see a hand raised too. So let me see if I can come back on camera, hopefully. So I see that, and I'm going to stop using my phone because now I can actually see your questions, guys. All right, so we answered Mary Hennessy, and I answered Mary B. Mary Haddis, you said, before I get to you, Mary Haddis, did someone have their hand up? I thought I saw my
I
hand
did,
up.
but I asked you to narrate your
Oh,
video, so you did, and I forgot to take my hand down. Thank you.
that's okay. Thanks for clarifying it. So we'll get back to Mary. Mary said you made a comment. This is different than color cues, and can you explain? Yes, Mary, as usual, you come up to the platform with a question I was hoping would get asked. So color cues. First of all, does everybody know what a cue is? If you do not, that's okay. I did not at one time, and if you're a first-time puppy raiser, you might not. A cue is a signal that you do this, you will get a reinforcement, a reward, a treat, a piece of kibble. You will get paid for this. You do this behavior, you do this, you get something for it. That is what a cue is. So the reason, Mary, I said that silky leash is different than collar cues. Silky leash is a technique that builds up to the collar cues we can give to our puppies and our dogs. Collar cues are just that. They're cues that are given through the collar, okay? Whereas silky leash is a technique that we build those cues on. And that's where I strongly, strongly wanted to put that in this presentation because it gets confusing, right? Can you teach your collar cues using silky leash? Yes. Can you use silky leash to teach collar cues? Yes, right? But they're not the same thing, okay? They're interconnected, but not the same thing. So that was a wonderful question, Mary. Lynn Shorn, is another way to think lean into means the leash loosens a bit, or do I have it totally wrong? Lynn, you don't have it totally wrong. I want you to understand that, just like I said before, you're absolutely correct. It's a different way of saying it, but we're all going in a circle saying the same thing. So when you say the leash loosens, I want you to look at that collar because that's where you're going to see that indicator first. And the leash will loosen, but the first thing, if a puppy is pulling, and they go like this, there's a slack right there. Because before it was here, right? Can everybody see my neck? But now it's here, right? So there's a slack. Even though there's still a pull, there's a slack. So what would help you more when you're working on silky leash is focus on the puppy's collar, okay? And see if you see a slack there. It will travel down the leash. You are absolutely correct. And that shows me you were paying attention on the different pressure points. So absolutely correct. Very good question. Barbara P says, is this ever a technique to be used for remedial work with an older dog? Yeah, definitely. I work with clients a lot and, oh, you're welcome, Lynn. And they have older dogs, 4, 5, 3, some of them are rescues. And that's all their learning history is pulling against this collar, pulling against this collar. You can work with dogs that have this pulling behavior with Silky Leash. You just have to set it up for an older dog a little bit different. You might have to start standing up with an older dog so you don't get tipped over, right? You might try a couple of other things, but you can definitely, it's not just for baby puppies. Just your approach might have to be a little bit different to set you up for success and no injuries, and set your puppy up for success and no injuries. Any other questions? You guys are awesome. Oh my God, I'm so excited. I'm excited I was a part of this learning for you guys. And you know, if you go back and you're like, I still don't get it. I know she said it. I know she showed it. I still don't get it. Please contact your puppy coordinators. You've got Allison Green, you've got Barry Lynn Wood, you've got Laura Fisher, you've got me. Please contact us. And even before us, contact your puppy counselors. They are amazing. And some of them are out there already trying to teach you this technique. If it doesn't make sense, don't do what I did and think, oh yeah, I got it. And then go home and you didn't get it and don't ask again. Ask again and again and again, okay? Because this technique will help you strengthen your leash skills, will help you be more bonded with your puppy, and will save you from injury, okay? All right, well, thank you guys. Enjoy your day too, Dorothy. Lori Sheen, how many sessions a day for a 4-month-old, assuming each session is less than 2 minutes? I usually do a couple. So by a couple, I mean 2 to 3. And I spread them out throughout the day. So yeah, they're short sessions in brief, Lori. Thank you. You're welcome, Suzanne. When you showed us using yourself as an example, it was super clear. Oh, thanks, Suzanne. I never mind being the guinea pig. So yeah, thank you, Suzanne. You guys have a wonderful day, okay? And enjoy the week.
VJ, can I jump in and ask you just a clarification on my question? This is Barb.
Yeah, go ahead, Barb.
So Risa's strong point is loose leash, and I do feel like I use the Silky Leash with that. Her remedial work needs to be in coming when I call her when she's distracted, or settling. Is there any way that this kind of technique, you just said something at the end about that it could help bond. Is that a remedial technique maybe I should revisit for some of her unsettling behaviors?
So Silky Leash, remember, is connected to the collar cues. So when it comes to other behavior, does it strengthen your bond? Yeah, because you're not pressurizing your dog. Is this going to help any other behaviors? It's not going to be that specific, Barb.
Okay.
This is specific to collar cues and this technique, but that's a great way of looking at it.
Maybe I need a session on other remedial.
And that's okay. Reach out to me, okay?
All right, thanks.
You're welcome. And I see one more hand, and then I'm going to call it a wrap. Kathleen, you had your hand raised up. It looks like no. So you guys have a wonderful day. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of you. And stay safe on that ice. Don't go skating.